Bikepacking Ultralight. In a series of 3 videos, we'll look at sleep systems, food and cooking systems, and also essential techniques. It's just too much for one video, so please subscribe and you won't miss any of them. This first one is all about sleeping systems.
I'll be the first to admit I'm not a highly experienced bikepacker, but I do know something about ultralight camping. Liz and I walked the length of the United States of America, following the wilderness Pacific Crest Trail. It's more than 2,500 miles long, and we camped out almost every night for 6 months. I've written and photographed ultralight backpacking for specialist magazines, and I've competed in mountain marathons, so I know a bit about traveling lightweight through wild places. It's not new, people have done it for centuries, but modern materials have made things lighter and more comfortable.
Bikepacking pulls all that together, and I'll be jumping in this video between this short little bikepacking trip and explanations of why I've chosen the gear I have and alternatives you might consider. I'm riding very close to home on what promises to be a bitterly cold night, so I'm not sure if what I've got will work too well. We'll find out. Oh, and incidentally, the rucksack I'm carrying, that is purely for my cameras. It would not be there on a normal bikepacking trip. Whether bikepacking or backpacking, it's a trade-off between day and night. To be really comfortable at night, you want more stuff, more food, more clothes, something to read, a bigger camera, a bottle of wine or a dram of whiskey. But the weight of all that stuff adds up, and you have to carry it during the day, and that is not comfortable. So that is the trade-off: comfort during the day against comfort during the night.
If you're heading somewhere to stay a few days and fish or watch wildlife, then you're not traveling much and you'll take more stuff. But in bikepacking, you're usually aiming to cover more ground, so minimum weight is important. Oh, and if I look a bit laden, I'm carrying 2 winter sleep systems to test, so that takes space.
There are 4 parts to a sleep system which we'll consider. The cold ground will suck heat from your body. It's called conduction, plus it can be uncomfortable to lie on. So typically we use a pad. Now this very thick blow-up pad is by Thermarest, a brand leader, and I used it for 2 weeks on a glacier in Alaska in night temperatures of -20 Celsius. There are smaller backpacking versions of this. This one's a little old now, and Thermarest do a tiny one which costs about £140. This from Alpkit is considerably cheaper, maybe smaller, and I really like it, although with all of these you do need to carry a repair kit. So I am a fan of ridge rests. We used these for 6 months while walking the Pacific Crest Trail because the desert thorns would have punctured inflatable mats. The trick with these is to cut them down to torso length, because that's the only bit you really need off the ground, and then use the spare section in 2 ways. You can use it as a sit mat for lunches, but also to slip just under your hip, the main contact point with the ground, and that gives you double padding just there.
I'm camping here. I'll explain why it's a good spot in the 3rd video. First, I have to clear the ground of sharp stones and twigs. It'll take a little time, but it's worth it for a good spot. That's because the pad I'm using is the Alpkit Cloud Base. Unlike a Thermarest or Ridge Rest, there's no foam, so if punctured, I'll be on the ground and lose heat through conduction.
I really think that's longer than it needs to be.
I've got to squeeze it inside the bivy bag too, and this is the first time I'm going to try this Alpkit bivy.
I'm not really a great fan of bivvy bags. I tend to camp out in the Scottish hills, and that means midges, and really a head net offers very limited protection against those beasts. It also means rain, and a wet bivvy bag doesn't really breathe properly, so that means condensation and a damp sleeping bag, which isn't great for the next day. But tonight, the forecast is for no rain. There should be quite a sharp frost, so we'll give it a chance and see how it performs. The place to use a bivvy bag, in my view, is a place where you can get some shelter from the elements, bunking down in a bus shelter or a storm drain or an old ruin. These lightweight bivvies are really sleeping bag protectors. That said, if you intend to ride through the night like some of the endurance racers and just catnap when you need it and then get going again when you get cold, then this might be for you. But that's not camping, and that's not what I'm really talking about here. This is an old style full Gore-Tex bivvy. Loads of room. I've actually slept in this with a dog and my rucksack, but it weighs almost the same as my two-person tent. Back when we were hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, we used a tarp that had mesh sides, a prototype made by an American called Henry Shires. He came and he hiked a little with us. Henry went on to start the very successful TarpTent company, and this is my Rainbow 2, a single skin, roomy, two-person tent which is ideal for mountain marathons. It's probably worth a separate video all of its own. Weighing very little, it is one of my favourite pieces of kit. Now, there are other lightweight tents out there which I haven't tried because I love this so much. It keeps out the rain, it keeps out the midges, and if I'm going to Scotland's wild places, I would take this. That's another thing about using a bivvy bag. Imagine all of this if it was chucking it down with rain, as it often does. You'd be much better being able to retreat into a tent. A good sleeping bag will last you decades, so I think it's worth spending some money. I get cold easily, so I look at the minimum temperature rating and I add on at least 5 degrees. This is my mountain marathon bag, which squishes down very small, is incredibly light, and to save weight, it has no zip. I use this throughout the summer for short trips. It's not luxurious, but it's good enough. This is the bag I'm using on the hill with 1,000 grams of down. The zip has side baffles, so there's no cold spots. Cheap sleeping bags are sewn through to keep the down in the baffles, but that stitching creates lines where there's no down. A good bag will have internal walls, box wall baffles, so there's an extra thickness of down. Oh, and never store them compressed. Finally, a silk liner. This doesn't really add much warmth, but crucially, it protects the bag's inner. It is really awkward to clean a good down sleeping bag. It is dead easy to clean these.
The last part of the sleep system is spare dry clothes in case you get soaked, and waterproof socks to walk around camp in wet shoes.
An absolutely key point is to get into your sleep system while you are still warm, because it can't generate heat, it can only retain it. If you've messed up and you are cold, you can always heat some water on your stove and put it in a water bottle and bring that in with you, and it acts as a hot water bottle. In the next video, we'll look at stoves, cooking and food, because that's a system that has to work together. If you've enjoyed this one, then please subscribe, you'll not miss the next one, and a thumbs up would be great as well. If you can add to all this, leave your advice in the comments, and then we can all share the wisdom, and we'll see you next time. Bye.